for most of the people that are eating ancestrally, eating a carnivore, the reasons that they're making those decisions, the reasons are exactly the same reason that somebody's deciding to go vegan. They're trying to improve their health. They care about the planet. They care about all of these things. So I think we have more in common than we don't.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today we have a great topic. We have the author of a book called Eat Like a Human. His name is Dr. Bill Schindler. And in this book, he is an archaeologist and a primitive technologist who draws on cutting edge science and a lifetime of research to explain how safety, nutrient density, and bioavailability are the cornerstones of a healthy diet. He shows readers how to live like modern hunter-gatherers by using the same strategies our ancestors used, as well as techniques still practiced by many cultures around the world to make food as safe, nutritious, bioavailable, and delicious as possible. Dr. Schindler, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, great. Well, let's start out with a little bit of a backstory, kind of a brief history of how you got into what led you to write the book.
Like so many people that are probably listening to this, food, diet, and health have always been important to me, and getting to the point where I was happy with my food and my diet and health was a mystery to me for decades of my life. And I had an incredibly unhealthy relationship with food for probably the first 30 years of my life in a number of different ways. I mean, maybe we'll dive into some of that as we continue the conversation. But like so many other people, I have tried just about every diet that's out there in order to not only, lose weight and look my best, but more importantly, to feel my best and just to live my best life. And none of them worked. Some of them were short-term fixes for different things, but none of them were ever lifetime solutions. And it wasn't until I really started to rely on my archaeological work and anthropological work. I taught archaeology and anthropology at the college level for over 20 years. And all of my research, turns out, has been in ancestral diets. And when I started to apply that information to our modern diet today, everything about my health transformed. And then when I realized how powerful it was, I implemented it and made it a part of our entire family. Me and my wife and Christina, and we have 3 kids, Billy, Brandon, and Alyssa. And I realized how transformative it was for our family. So about 4 years ago, our family opened up a restaurant called the Modern Stone Age Kitchen, and we have a nonprofit called the Food Lab. And between both of those entities together, we are really working towards not only nourishing the community, but continuing to conduct research all over the world with indigenous and traditional groups and implementing what we learn into modern diets today.
Amazing. Amazing. And so, yeah, I've seen some pictures traveling the world. I don't know if that was your son with a cup of milk and blood.
That was my son,
stuff
yes.
like that. I've seen your photos there. So tell us a little bit about that. What have you learned from, studying traditional cultures and traveling the world like that?
The number one thing, and this is really important for everyone to understand, and my family has been very fortunate to, we've done everything we can to make it to different places all over the world and meet people and learn from them and share food with them and cook with them. The thing that the number one thing we've learned is that humans are amazing. Like literally all over the world, humans are amazing. And I think this is a very important thing, especially, in today's political climate where we have so much that's tearing us apart. When we get past all of that nonsense and just meet real, genuine people and families and communities, we have always been so incredibly impressed with just humans and human nature. And food was central to everything that we were looking for to learn. And food is a great way to learn about people. So I know that isn't directly related to diet, but really it is. I mean, it is related to health for sure. Mm-hmm. I would also say Dr. Weston Price and his work in the 1930s has really had a strong influence on my work and the way that I view food and diet and health and traditional cultures and all of that. And everywhere that we've gone has just reinforced what he reported on. Animal sources of nutrients were the most, are the most coveted. They are the safest. They're the most nutrient dense. They are the most bioavailable. fat is in high quality saturated fat is incredibly important no matter where we are. And although I have been around a few people who eat only animal, in most cases, even in these traditional groups, they're eating a lot of different things. But when it comes to vegetables, when it comes to plants, people are very selective about the plants that they choose to include in their diets, as far from a food perspective, and they're always doing something to that food to make it safer or more nutrient dense or more bioavailable, or in many cases, all three at the same time. The idea of just running out and grabbing a vegetable and eating it raw is not a thing. It is literally, this is what we're going to target. This is how we're going to process it, and this is how we're going to consume it. And and that's across the board. The other thing I think, in every single case, fermentation is at the core of every traditional diet around the world. I have never come across a diet that doesn't have fermentation at its core for a number of different reasons. And when I say fermentation, I don't mean just making sauerkraut, although sauerkraut's an amazing food. Fermenting vegetables, fermenting fruits, fermenting alcohol, fermenting meat, fermenting dairy, fermenting all sorts of things. Fermentation is at the core of so many of these diets, and I really believe that for people dipping their foot into this world and trying to connect with their food at a deeper, more meaningful level, fermentation is something that people can start implementing in their homes immediately in a very safe way. And you'll learn so much about microbes, yourself, your environment, the past, all of that at the same time. It's an incredible way to start.
That's super interesting. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. So, I mean, a lot of people have probably heard, okay, fermenting yogurt or sauerkraut, like you mentioned, or kombucha or whatever. But you mentioned fermenting vegetables and fruits. What does that look like?
Well, a couple things. So, first of all, as far as vegetables are concerned, every single, and I know people have probably heard this, over the past 2 years, on repeat, that plants are trying to kill you. Plants do, I will, that's a little bit strong for my take, but I will say every single plant on this planet has some level of toxin in it. Some of these toxins will kill you. Some of these toxins will make you sick. Some of these toxins are not a very big deal. Some of these toxins are not a very big deal right now, but eating the same thing over and over again, week after week, month after month, year after year, can cause all sorts of problems, like oxalates, for example. But all plants have some level of toxin in them. There's a number of different ways to mitigate the issues related to these toxins, or in some cases, get rid of these toxins through different technological approaches. Fermentation is one of them. It doesn't work on all toxins, but it does help in a lot of different ways. Fermentation of grains, for example, is a powerful, powerful tool. So there is no need for grains in our diet whatsoever, but if you're choosing to eat grains, things like long, wild sourdough fermentation creates a completely different food than the foods created without doing it. Soaking, sprouting, nixtamalizing, those sorts of things are incredibly important. Sometimes with plants, it's things like drying or, like I mentioned earlier, soaking. So there's a lot of different things you can do with different plants to help detoxify them and make the nutrients in them more available. So fermentation is one of the tools in our ancestral toolkit to help make that happen.
Got it.
And then fruit. And then this is really, really cool. Again, there's that I know of, nutritional need for alcohol in our diets whatsoever. However, one thing that's very interesting, there was a theory put out about 20 years ago by an anthropologist at University of California, Berkeley. It's called the Drunken Monkey Hypothesis. And the idea is, the suggestion is that every mammal in the world naturally seeks out alcohol. And I know everybody say, what are they going to a liquor store? No. When you have a ripe fruit fall on the ground, it's covered with wild yeast. It will spontaneously ferment. And if anybody's never seen it, I know everybody's on the TikTok thing now, but if you go to Google and Google Drunken Monkey Hypothesis and watch videos of animals, just drunk giraffes and monkeys eating these fruits and getting themselves drunk, it's actually quite hilarious. But what does that mean for us? Well, this part of the suggestion is, and I wholeheartedly agree with this, 2 parts of plants that are typically low in toxin or toxin free are flowers and fruits. And that makes sense because in both cases, they are the only parts of the plant there to attract. Everything else is trying to repel and protect itself. but a flower is trying to attract, like pollinating insects, for example. It's part of the reproductive cycle. So it makes sense that they're beautiful and they smell sweet and they taste good and they're not toxic. Some are, but in most cases they're not. Fruit is another example of this. The role of a fruit is to attract animals to come and eat the fruit when the seeds are ripe, to make sure that the seeds go through the digestive tract of that animal and get deposited in a pile of manure somewhere else and then sprout, and it's the next generation of the plant. But that only works when the fruit is completely ripe. And if you look at all fruits, unripe fruits have a level of toxin in them that is much higher than what the ripe fruit has in it. And in some cases, there's no toxin at all by the time the fruit is ripe. When the fruit is unripe, it is trying to protect itself. It doesn't want those seeds to get eaten until they're absolutely mature. And this is the case for all sorts of wild fruits, but it's also the case in the grocery store. I mean, if you look at the toxin load of a green banana, and I know people that are trying to eat less available sugars and lower their carbohydrate intake believe that if they eat a green banana, it's going to, somehow, and it is, it's less sweet. There's less available sugars in it. But it's not worth the risk of eating it and the toxin load that you get with it. But as soon as the banana turns fully ripe, those toxins are now gone. The fruit is ripe. There's a ton of sugar, and the idea is that the plant wants you to eat it and then spread the seed somewhere else. So part of this drunken monkey hypothesis is suggesting, and I think there's something to this. It doesn't, especially when you're talking about wild fruits, it is very dangerous to eat unripe wild fruits, because if they're unripe, they have these toxin loads. And a great example, if anybody's from the East Coast of North America, like I am, a wild persimmon is one of my favorite fruits on the planet when it's ripe. If you eat it too early, and I mean it could be 2 days too early, you'll never eat one again. It's highly astringent. It sucks all the water out of your mouth. It's very, very bad. Another local wild fruit around here is a pawpaw. George Washington's favorite dessert was a ripe pawpaw, chilled, and he would eat it during pawpaw season. But an unripe, if anybody's ever eaten an unripe pawpaw, you're going to be on the toilet for 3 days because you have massive diarrhea. It's toxic in the unripe state. It's not toxic in the ripe state. So one way to be sure, and this is part of that drunken monkey hypothesis, that fruit is perfectly safe to eat, is that when it already started producing alcohol. So when it already started producing alcohol, by default, it had to have gotten to the place where all those sugars are now available and they're getting eaten by the yeast, and then you can do it. Now, again, it might be a little bit of a stretch. I don't know. But it is very interesting to think about all these different mechanisms that have been, that honed over millions of years of evolution, that the people that did it right lived and had babies, and the people that did it wrong got sick and died and didn't have babies. So that connection with our senses and our food is very, very interesting. There is nothing in nature that is truly sweet that is toxic. And to make sure that we've gotten to that sweet place, again, that alcohol might be a part of it. So I don't know where that leaves us, but it is an interesting thing to at least ponder.
Well, yeah, that is interesting. I hadn't heard that, especially about the banana. I actually, in my mind, thought that more of a green, kind of greenish. Obviously, if it's too green and you can't even open it, it's too much. But I thought was better than a fully ripe banana, because you hear, it has less sugar, it has more prebiotic fiber. These are things that you've heard over the years. So this is the first time I'm hearing about it having a heavier toxic load. So that's good to know. I don't eat bananas very frequently anyway. But yeah.
Is it an issue if you eat one banana? That's no. But these are the kind of things you should keep in mind. If your go-to is a banana shake every single morning with peanut butter and kefir or something like this, and you're doing this yourself repeatedly, I mean, first off, and you're right, the bananas that are in the grocery store bear no resemblance to the wild ancestors that, our ancestors were eating, back in the day. And they're way high sugar. Yes, absolutely. But these trade-offs that we tell ourselves, I don't want that high glycemic index. I don't want all that available sugar, so I'm going to eat an unripe banana. Well, there's other things to consider. I mean, maybe we just shouldn't eat bananas at all. It's probably the better answer.
Right. It's interesting. The banana's like got to be super controversial. There's like all sorts of stuff about bananas being bad for blood sugar spikes and other stuff. And then other people are like, no, the potassium and there's a lot of back and forth about bananas and fruits in general. Personally, I don't know, longtime listeners know my backstory. I don't know if you do, but back in 2013, I had massive massive pain and inflammation all throughout my fingers, hands, and arms. I had experimented with different diets, such as trying the vegan diet. And then I was going to Subway and getting a foot-long sandwich that had a little bit of lettuce and carrot, in a foot long of bread, and eating that thinking I'm healthy because it's vegan. And meanwhile, I'm just inflaming my body and eating horrible stuff, right? So it didn't work out for me. Now, again, for some people, if vegan does work for them and they do it a better way than I did and don't just eat bread and pasta all day, fine. That's your choice, certainly. But would love to talk about, like, what are some of the things that you've seen when people eat like a human, like your book is called, and what are some of let's talk a little bit about like the benefits of that. And I want to eventually get into like what you eat and what the kind of diet is comprised of.
Sure. So when I say eat like a human, I'm certainly not suggesting that there's any one diet that fits everyone for a variety of different reasons. What I mean when I say eating like a human is the following: that we need to understand that when we started making tools to process our food, get different resources from our environment, do things outside of our body to raw materials before it ever enters our mouth, we started down this path of literally self-domestication. We literally started, our bodies responded to this incredible, safe, nutrient-dense, bioavailable nutrition that we were creating and then putting into our mouths, and our bodies and our brains grew over millions of years. But our digestive tract did not. What we did with these tools before we ate it was so incredibly powerful that our digestive tract didn't have to change. In fact, in proportion to our bodies, it was actually shrinking. Our teeth were actually shrinking. The only two things that we have in our bodies that allow us to physically and chemically break down food properly and then have those nutrients go to where they need to be to help nourish our bodies, those things were getting smaller and going away as our nutritional needs were skyrocketing, as our bodies and our brains were getting larger, until eventually at 300,000 years ago, you get modern Homo sapiens like us. Massive brains, large bodies compared to our ancestors, massive nutritional requirements. So eating like a human means recognizing the role that technology has played in our food and implementing those technologies to accomplish those three things you mentioned when you did that introduction. And thank you, by the way, for the introduction, to make food safe, nutrient dense, and bioavailable. And that's what the technological input that our ancestors continued to create over millions of years did. And then our diets changed, our nutrients changed, our bodies responded, and here we are as modern day Homo sapiens. The problem is, the food processing for the majority of 3.5 million years was all for I'm sure they were making mistakes, but in general, it was pushing for that safety, nutrient density, and bioavailability. And now food processing today serves other purposes. It serves other people to make money or create shelf life in foods or uniformity in foods or all these other things. And not that some of those things are all that bad. Okay, if people are working really hard, they want to make money, great. If people are trying to ship food in different places, well, maybe there's something good about some of that. Isn't necessarily by itself inherently bad. What's bad is they're trying to accomplish those goals at the expense of things like safety, nutrient density, and bioavailability, the very things that actually made our diets what they are, that literally made us what we are. So things like recognizing the incredible role that animals played in our dietary past and making that the mainstay of our diets, that's eating like a human. Doing things like fermentation or nixtamalization or soaking or sprouting or drying or grinding or geophagy, all these other things that we did to make plant resources safe, nutrient dense, and bioavailable, implementing those into our diets. And that's what I mean. Secondly, so the role of technology is number one, the most important part of understanding how to eat like a human. Number two, the other thing that we need to recognize is that food is ingrained in everything we are as humans. Food plays such a central role to everything. It isn't just, being nourished, meaning you get the macro and micronutrients you need into your body. That doesn't suffice for humans. That might suffice for a deer, or that might suffice for a rat. That doesn't suffice for a human, because in order to be fully nourished as a human, we need to recognize that food plays a central role in our health, in our religion, in our emotions, in our culture, in our traditions, in our politics, in everything. So in order to be fully nourished, we need to meet our nutrient needs, our emotional needs, our cultural needs, for some people, religious needs, whatever. All of those things together come to create a complete package of what nourishment is. And we can't separate any of those. They all have to come together for, whatever's important to you. And I think those are the two main parts of what I mean when I say eat like a human. Now, for me, I would say, I mentioned earlier, our biggest change from an evolutionary perspective in body and brain size happened at about 2 million years ago, where we jump in body and brain size almost to modern proportions. And the biggest difference at that moment was we started hunting. We've had meat in our diet for 1.5 million years earlier, but we started hunting about 2 million years ago. And me and several other people like Miki Ben-Dor and some other anthropologists and archaeologists believe that it's that influx of incredibly nutrient-dense, bioavailable parts of animals like blood, fat, organs, the offal, in addition to the meat, what was able to fuel our bodies and our brains and to support that massive growth. That, to me, right now is still what should be the mainstay of our diet. That's where we should be getting the majority of our nutrition. However, plants, and if you look into the past, we were eating plants, and this is part of. I love the carnivore diet for a lot of different reasons. I think it is a simple, and I mean simple in a good way. We don't have to think too hard to follow it. It's like if it comes from an animal, eat. If it doesn't, don't. It's a simple way for people who have lived an entire life of horrible diets to start to get on track. Immediately, by going carnivore, you're immediately low carb. You're immediately taking out all the plant toxins from your diets. I mean, you'll see massive benefits from that approach. However, if you look at our ancestral dietary past, I mean, if you really look at it under a close lens, that wasn't the way that our ancestors ate. I mean, we had plants in our diets before we started eating animals. We had plants in our diets the entire time we were eating animals. Sure, are there places in the Arctic and towards the poles where, plants in our diets were only for a very short period of the year? Absolutely. But the majority of our ancestors were eating plants and animals. The way I like to think about it, though, is, and just like you, I never was vegan or vegetarian. However, for a large part of my life, I was of that mindset that health starts in the produce section of the grocery store. Like, that's where all the health is, and all the other stuff, including the meat section of the grocery store, was nonsense or superfluous or something like that. Or gluttony. So this is the way I like to think about it. And I think it's a very good way. Animals should be the primary source of nutrition. That's where your most high quality digestible protein is going to come from. That's where the highest quality fat is going to come from. That's where a lot of your micronutrients are going to come from. Plants are here for several reasons. Or we should think about plants in our diet in several different ways. They're poison. They're there for entertainment. They're there for medicine, and they are there for certain supplementation of different things if we need it in our diet. But let's break that down very quickly. We know about the poison part easily. What about the pleasure part? I mean, I love the texture of different vegetables. I love the taste of different vegetables. I absolutely love Brussels sprouts. I know some people can't stand them, and I know some people think they smell like poop, and sometimes they do, but I love Brussels sprouts. So it's pleasurable to me to eat certain foods, to eat certain plants. And you know what? There's something special about that. I mean, that should be our diet should be pleasurable. Plants create most of our alcohol. So if you're somebody that drinks and it's an important part of your life, or if you have a glass of wine, plants are a source of that in almost all cases. Most of your, many of your recreational drugs. I've never even smoked pot in my life, but if people do, those are coming from plants. Plants also are where your herbs and your spices are coming from to season our food. And at low levels, those things, the flavors that come from them, are pleasurable to us. But it is important for us to understand that the same thing that at low levels in our food gives us the pleasure of the flavor of the spice or the herb, at higher levels can become medicine, and at higher levels become poisonous. I mean, it's no surprise. Cinnamon is from the bark of a tree. And the flavor that we get, that cinnamon, at low levels, we very much enjoy it, but it's actually an insecticide. It's there to keep, it's insecticide and a fungicide to keep fungus and insects off the tree. So it's, again, low levels, we love it. Higher levels, we can actually use it in a lot of these things to help detoxify things or what have you. And or as medicine, and at much higher levels, cinnamon can make you incredibly sick, and so can many of these other things. Let's not forget that mace that you get sprayed with it, and the police are trying to clear out a bar or break up a fight, is what it is when it's at lower levels. At lower levels, it's a very pleasurable thing for us to include in our food. So we need to. If I do truly believe that we don't need to count calories, we don't need to count all these things. I do believe if we're in tune with our senses, truly in tune with our senses, and are presented with real, genuine food prepared properly, we don't need to ask anybody what to eat. But we need to categorize these things in the right way. Animals provide an incredible source of safe, bioavailable, nutrient-dense nutrition. Plants provide all sorts of wonderful things and a whole sorts of dangerous things as well. So that just means we have to be conscious of what we're selecting to eat, and when we're selecting to eat them, how we prepare them.
Yeah, that's really good stuff. I mean, people who think they're eating super healthy, but they're eating a kale salad, a big kale salad every day, over and over and over and over, full of oxalates, right? That could be an issue. We had actually a podcast with the author of the book called Toxic Superfoods, and
Sally Norton, a good friend.
Yeah, Sally Norton. Yeah, exactly. And I was surprised to learn that even sweet potatoes were a problem for her. Right. They don't seem to be a problem for me, but I also don't eat a very high oxalate diet. Right. So every once in a while I can tolerate them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, for me personally, going on the paleo style diet is what really healed me from all my inflammation. And, I've never gone back. And so, yeah, I personally don't eat grains. I don't eat bread or pasta. It's been many, many years, those kind of things. And I just feel great. So I'm not going to go back. And I feel like now I am intuitively eating. I can tell, okay, this is going to feel good. This isn't going to feel good. I can do this. I can't do this. I know my body's kind of craving certain healthy foods for me. For me, it's eggs. I just love organic pasture raised eggs. I eat them pretty much every day for lunch, a whole bunch of them. And, I feel great on that. And then for dinner, having some sort of meat and veggies feels great for me. I think probably where I'm lacking is on some of the organ meats and blood and things like that. I mean, is that practical in the US? Like, how do you even get blood? Can you buy blood to drink?
Blood's hard. And what I was trying to do with the book, most of that book is filled with, actually, the recipes in that book are what we founded the entire restaurant on. The recipes in that book are incredibly practical at home and incredibly practical, which we found over the past several years, even in a commercial situation, creating a lot of food for the community, which I'm very pleased about. But what I was also trying to do with that book was push the boundaries just a little bit in our thought process, because we get very comfortable in things. Like, for example, when people started talking about the paleo diet, it was like this weird thing. Like it was pushing people's minds so hard they couldn't even think about it. Then when people started talking about keto, like, oh my God, like, are you kidding me? I was raised my whole life thinking I'm supposed to eat like 80% carbohydrates or whatever, but now we're taking these steps where, okay, paleo diet, it's now something that people regularly can talk about, or carnivore, or keto, and all of that. Now we're at that next level. What is the next thing? Because none of them are 100% right. By default, none of them ever could be 100% right, but they all have these merits that now are ingrained in our, they're almost a standard thing that we just talk about. So now we can talk about that next sort of barrier. And what I was trying to do was break down a few, like insects. And I wholeheartedly believe that, I am 100% confident that insects were as much as animals are the primary source of food for us now and have been for at least 2 million years, insects were the primary source of nutrition prior to 3.5 million years ago, probably all the way up to 2 million years ago. The entirety of the time that we were hunting, we were still eating insects. Insects were the original superfood, continued to be a major part of our diets throughout time and throughout the world, and are still a major part of diets in different places around the world today. Insects are incredible. Unfortunately, the insects have been too politicized and polarized right now that the conversation has come down to insects are meat. And that's a silly conversation. I mean, it's silly. I mean, everybody's arguing about something that we shouldn't be arguing about. What we should be thinking about is insects and meat, because truly, if your approach to food is an ancestral one, if you're trying to be ancestrally appropriate with the way that you think about food and get your nutrition into your body, that insects have been in the diet the entire time. There is no doubt that's true. It's a little bit much for us to think about because it's not really in our mindset in America, but it's 100% true. So from an ancestrally appropriate place, it's true. From a nutrient density and bioavailability place, insects are incredible, like incredible. And from a sustainability perspective, they're incredible as well. From an economic perspective, they're okay. Depends on who's raising them. But across the board, whatever your boxes are that you're checking, if you can get away from the gross ick factor, all the boxes you're trying to check, not you, I mean somebody who's thinking in these ways, they probably meet all of them or most of them. So again, I'm not suggesting that we all just sit. First of all, please, everybody listening to this, I am not suggesting we eat. I'm not taking your meat away. I'm not suggesting you don't get your ribeye any longer. That's not what I'm suggesting. But what I'm suggesting is think about the idea that insects were the foundational food for us before animals entered. And, when our ancestors didn't have any tools at all, they were literally eating insects, fruits, and vegetables. And of that, fruits and vegetables are by default, most of them are out of our diet because they're toxic. And then you have to eat hyper-local and hyper-seasonal. You're not storing any food. You're not doing any of that sort of thing. So it's very limited what you can get. Insects are there all the time. Insects were that animal. Then now animals are something we can access all year round, and plants are seasonal, continue to be. So anyhow, what I was trying to do with that entire chapter on insects was let's at least think about this. Let's really recognize how important insects are in other diets around the world. How important were they to our ancestors? And at least start to think about this. I have a chapter on clay and ash and charcoal. All three of those things were incredibly important in our ancestral dietary past. All three of those things are incredibly important in many animal diets. There's something for us at least to think about. So as far as the blood is concerned, do I think that the only way to be a fully nourished human is to drink blood every day like the Messiah in the sombrero? Absolutely not. But I will tell you that the sombrero warriors that I was with when we drank blood and milk, like in the picture behind me, were 100% the healthiest looking people that I have ever seen in the entire world. And all that they consume every single day is blood and milk. I mean, that's the mainstay of their diet. Blood and raw milk. It's unbelievable. So to me, at least to bring that up in a conversation, that it's in somebody's head, like maybe they think it's gross, but it's in their head. This is the food that is nourishing the healthiest people I've ever seen in my life. And neither of them are easy to get or legal in many places in the U.S. Like they're not raw milk, is impossible to get in many places. And for a variety of different reasons, blood is impossible to get in many places. So something's wrong. And at least if we can push that barrier in our heads a little bit, maybe someday it will be part of our diet. But I do think it's criminal to kill an animal and take half of it and put it on the grocery store shelves, and the other half, which actually has more nutrition in it than the stuff we're actually eating, never makes it onto the table for us or our families. There's something weird and crazy about that. So from a nutritional perspective, from an ethical perspective, from a sustainability perspective, and from an economic perspective, eating more of the animal makes sense across the board, and it is ancestrally appropriate. So here's some tricks. One is heart is essentially a muscle with more nutrients in it than any of the other muscles in the body. So heart is a great sort of gateway drug for organs because you can cook it in many cases just like you would cook meat. And you're going to get a similar texture, but just more nutrition. And you'll start to, it's an easy step. Liver, chicken liver is, again, a very easy, milder way to get into the liver world. Chicken liver is one of my favorites. Pork liver is amazing. Beef liver for some people is a little bit strong. So like you probably know, but I know a lot of people, they'll eat a piece of it frozen every day. And when things are cold, our body doesn't register the flavors as much. So for example, if you're salting food that you're going to serve, you're salting food and tasting it while it's warm, but you're going to serve it cold, you have to salt it heavier because you're not going to taste that salt as much when it's cold. So the organy flavors are not as apparent when it's cold as when it's warm, and then the texture is not there when it's frozen. But one thing to do, and we deal with a lot of organs in our house and a lot of organs here at the restaurant, is if you soak the organs in milk overnight, then it really does help to mild out, some of that organy type flavor. We use a lot of liver, heart, and kidney is very easy for us to get. We use a lot of fat in our cooking. We use a lot of skin and different things as well, like pork skin. We do a lot of pork rinds, but there's other things our pork skin goes into as well, like our scrapple, for example. And then another trick is if the texture is something that you're not used to, then put it in something else. So things like pâtés, for example, are great, or grinding it up and putting it with other meats. Or things like, again, we make scrapple with it, scrapple, liverwurst, that sort of thing. And a final little trick: if you're already grinding your organs up and putting it in with the meat and the fat and making your ancestral blend burgers or hamburgers or whatever it is, or meatballs, the organs have a very distinct color and texture. And even many times when you grind it, your kids are going to look at it and say, I see the liver in that hamburger. Like, they will. So what we started doing was this. When we grind the meat and the fat, we grind it like we normally would. But we take the organs and we throw them in the Vitamix. We throw them in a blender and we puree them up and then mix them together with the meat and the fat. And it distributes out the color, and it distributes out the texture is imperceptible, and it's a fantastic way to make that burger look like a meat and a fat burger, not an offal burger, or meatballs and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I have heard of people having like little pieces of frozen liver and like throwing it in their smoothie or stuff like that as well. Yeah, I haven't, honestly. And I mean, what's your thoughts about, like, for people like me who, first of all, I'd love to know, maybe you have some resources. Maybe you guys sell this stuff. Where's your restaurant located, by the way?
Well, it's called the Modern Stone Age Kitchen, and it's in Chestertown, Maryland, on the Eastern Shore. So on the east side of the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland. It's a cute little historic town. You got to come see us. So we're here. There's other restaurants. There's festivals. It's a really cute old historic town.
Yeah, I would absolutely love to. Again, I don't think there's any restaurants that I know of around me that serve things with like organ meats, specifically, or anything like that. And so I'll take like a grass-fed, desiccated organ complex from New Zealand or whatever. That's kind of what I take. Is that okay? Obviously, if I can't, is that the second best option, do you think, if I can't get the real stuff? Or do you have maybe a resource like a certain website that's really good for people? Or maybe you sell and ship nationwide these kind of organ meats?
Well, unfortunately, because of the way that so we are not a USDA inspected facility. And if we are, and I have no desire to be one at the moment, if I wanted to ship any animal products across state lines, I'd have to become a USDA inspected facility, which comes with a whole bunch of resource needs that we just don't have. So you can anybody who wants to come and eat with us, we'd be very happy to serve you all these amazing, nourishing foods. But so to answer the first part of your question, I think if in absence of I would always go to real food first. Real food, to get all of your nutrition, real food processed properly, is my number one go-to. Short of that, something like the freeze-dried desiccated organs, stuff coming from New Zealand is amazing stuff. Things like, and if you're just starting to dip your toes into this as well, another great resource, my friend James Barry, who has Pluck seasoning. Pluck seasoning is awesome. I mean,
I've met him too.
Popcorn.
Yeah, I love Pluck. Yeah, I met him.
He's cool. That's a great way to. I mean, he's brilliant. He actually is not hiding the organ flavor. He's actually celebrating it. It's brilliant. It works well. We love Pluck. So the desiccated freeze-dried things, that's great. There's a lot of online resources that have you can have access to really high quality organs as well. Things like Force of Nature, for example, or Nose to Tail and Paleo Valley, and all those places and there's a lot more. I know. I just know a few of them where you can ship in these organs. And again, it's hard. because so many people, and I know I've done this so many times in my life, I would hear a podcast of somebody, I really resonated with, or I'd read a book and the author like really spoke to me in the book, and all of a sudden I want to like change my entire life and then adopt everything that they've done like the next day. And it's impossible. It can't be done. It always ends in failure. So you have to be able to create a hierarchy, either write it down or just have it in your head of things that are important to you. So, for example, a lot of people will have a large conversation about the importance of raising animals properly and slaughtering them properly and butchering them properly and preparing them properly and eating nose to tail and doing all of these things, and the importance of supporting local farmers and doing all of this stuff. And then you would leave, okay, I'm going to do nothing but eat beyond a 20-mile radius, and I'm going to eat 98% of the animal. And for some people, it's possible. But in all those cases, it'd take 3 years to make all the contacts and get all the skills you need to be able to do it. So, you have to pick what the most important thing is at the moment. So is the most important thing to get incredibly high quality liver and start to play with it and start to implement it into your cooking and your diet? And if that's the case, then using some of these subscription services that you trust, like some of the ones that I mentioned, are a fantastic way to start doing this immediately. And then you can start looking around and say, oh my gosh, I didn't even know, but the farmer 5 miles down the road, goes to the abattoir that's 10 miles down the road, and the entire thing, has only moved 12 miles. And then I didn't do the math right, I know. But, and then you now are there. But if you leave this and say, hey, I'm only going to use stuff that's 5 miles away, and all it's for many of us, unfortunately, it's impossible at the moment. We're very lucky. We have some incredible farms not far from us, and we have an abattoir that's about 7 miles from us. And, we have, and in fact, we have 2 abattoirs within, about 10, 15 miles away. It's fantastic. But a lot of people don't have that. But we do have these other resources. The other thing that's incredibly important, I think, as well, I'm confident, is to learn some of these skills. YouTube is great for some stuff. It really, really is. But in person is awesome. One of the things that we pride ourselves on, we're in our teaching kitchen right now, and we teach all sorts of classes from cheese making to home butchering and all these sorts of things. And sometimes it's just being in the presence of somebody, or holding that knife, or seeing that animal in front of you, or actually cooking it and smelling it and realizing, yeah, it can be done. It only took 7 minutes. Or those are the humps, the hurdles that we need to get over in order to take that step in our own kitchen. We just, last weekend, I was with a good friend of mine, Robert Sykes. I don't know if you know who he is. He owns Keto Brick. He's a fantastic guy. Me and my wife, Christina, were with him and his wife, Crystal, and he rented a cabin in Northwest Arkansas, in Rogers, Arkansas. And we had about 14 people come, and we did this ancestral living weekend. We were butchering and we were cooking together and we were making head cheese. We were doing all these amazing things. But now everybody's left having been a part of all of those different pieces, and they can now start to implement them into their own kitchen. So I think getting that checklist, that what am I going to do first? And when I tackle that, what's second? That sort of thing is very helpful at first. Taking those first steps, but then finding somebody you can work with to learn from is very helpful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And for people listening who are like, well, why do we need these organ meats and blood and things like that? And why is meat good for, why is meat good for you? I heard for many years it's not. We've talked a lot about kind of like the foods and things like that. But for the people who may be listening, who, again, it's confusing out there, man. You listen to a lot of podcasts and you'll hear a lot of different opinions about things, right? So does this go back to basically what we started off with saying about nutrient dense, right? Is it because meat is just so nutrient dense compared to other food? Is that why we want to make these the focus of our diet?
I think there's several different pieces. One is nutrient density, but another really key factor is bioavailability. So Gundry, who wrote Plant Paradox.
Yeah.
In Plant Paradox, this is one of the things that I really like that he said in it. He was talking about this idea of bioavailability, and I use it in all of my classes. I think it's great. I was the kid who grew up, and I would sit there. We didn't have cell phones when we were growing up. So what did we do when we ate breakfast? And we'd read the Cheerio box when we were eating our Cheerios, right? And I remember I just stare at the nutrition label and I'd read it. And then at lunch, I'd have Campbell's soup, and Campbell's soup. I'm eating the Campbell's soup. I'm reading the Campbell's soup can, and I call it the can of soup effect. I had that idea that, okay, if I'm eating the Campbell's soup and it said there's 2 servings and it has, one serving has 100 calories and it has this much protein and this much fat, and that's what I'm eating, and that's going to go everywhere it needs to be, and it's going to nourish my body with all those nutrients. And it's 100% wrong. What Gundry spoke about was the idea that he equated putting food in our mouth like being in New Jersey and going to New York City and getting in the Lincoln Tunnel to do it. And putting food in your mouth is like going into the Lincoln Tunnel. When you go into the Lincoln Tunnel, you're not in the Hudson River, right? You're in a tunnel. And the only thing you can guarantee is that you're going to come out the other end in New York City, right? So the idea is you put food in your mouth, the only thing you can guarantee is that some of it's going to come out the other end. In order for that food to get absorbed and used properly by your body, 2 things have to be in place at the same time. One is that food needs to be broken down properly. And number 2 is your body and your gut have to be healthy. And if those 2 things are working, then the nutrients in there, the max amount of those nutrients are going to get absorbed through. So it doesn't matter how nutrient dense a food is if it's not broken down properly or your body and your gut aren't in the right state to absorb those nutrients properly. So the cool thing, so animals are not only incredibly nutrient dense, but they're also incredibly bioavailable, and they're incredibly safe. They don't have the kind of toxins that we see in these plants. So that and plus the diversity of nutrients. And I grew up just like, I know Sean Baker posted something the other day about, I think it was Sean Baker. We thought meat had fat and protein. And then the reality is these are all the things that meat has in it. It never crossed my mind. I grew up, meat has, if I eat a steak, I'm getting fat and protein, and that's it. If I want anything else, I have to go, eat a salad to get all those other. Meat has an amazing amount of diversity of nutrients in it. But more importantly, animals have a larger diversity of nutrients in them. So when we think, meat is a lot more nutrient dense and bioavailable than any plant on the planet. But if we're talking about nutrient density and bioavailability as key factors in this conversation, meat is the least nutrient dense and least bioavailable part of an animal, right? So the blood, the fat, the organs, all of those things are more nutrient dense and more bioavailable than the meat is. So again, meat is awesome. But the gold standard is the entire animal. And in addition, I know most of the time we talked about the nutritional aspect of this kind of approach. But if we're eating the entire animal, then it sits better with me from an ethical perspective. If we're eating the entire animal, it's more sustainable. It is more it's more economically appropriate as well. And it's a win-win-win across the board for all 3.
Yeah, definitely. I really agree with that. And I think, I had someone who I met, kind of an acquaintance, and he was just dead set, like just, for lack of a better word, brainwashed that like vegan was the only way and that's the healthy way. And, I watched him talk about how he has like really bad psoriasis and all these other issues. And, you meet other people who have lots of other issues as well. And I would highly encourage people to think about going on, this type of sort of ancestral diet and seeing if you can eliminate, or even like you said, carnivore is so great because it's really like an elimination diet, right? You're eliminating anything that could be possibly causing your, whatever it is, autoimmune, inflammation, IBS, you name it, right? And so that's something really powerful to try and see if someone's dealing with some sort of chronic issue, to see if they can resolve it by eliminating all of the things that could be possibly causing that. So yeah, really agree with that. One more question for you. I know we're coming short on time, and was about carbs. So you look like a fit guy. You clearly like work out, you eat good. Are carbs a part of your diet? Do carbs need to be a part of your diet? For me these days, I do organic raw honey. I do some blueberries sometimes. Sometimes I'll throw in some sweet potatoes and other stuff. I wouldn't say that I'm keto anymore necessarily, but I would definitely say I'm lower carb, like under 100 grams of carbs per day personally. Where do you stand on that conversation?
Well, I'll tell you this. I am keto most of the time. And when I eat carbs, it is for fulfilling one of those other needs, an emotional need or a cultural need or a situational need, a traditional need, something like that. I don't feel for myself at the moment that I need any carbs whatsoever. I do not know enough to even suggest that that it would be true for young kids or pregnant or lactating women or that sort of thing. I don't know, but I will, or high intensity athletes. I don't know enough about that. And again, I would default back to say, I do believe in most cases, our ancestors were in a state of ketosis for most of the year, most of their lives. But I doubt in all cases were they in ketosis from birth all the way till death. So, but I think a ketogenic approach for me is a very healthy approach. However, I will also say this, and this is something I think people need to talk about more than ever. One of the issues with all the dietary jargon that's going on today is that our diets, for most of us, are so incredibly bad that any change we make, we see improvements. I mean, we just see improvements. So if we decide to go local or vegan or vegetarian or carnivore or keto or whatever it is, like we all see improvements because it's better than the lifetime of terrible diet that we've experienced for decades prior to that. But then we fool ourselves into thinking, oh my gosh, like this is the diet for me for the rest of my life. I can promise you, no matter who is listening, the diet that healed you is not the diet for the rest of your life. There's always going to be some sort of tweak. So for example, if the most important thing to you right now is to lose weight and you go on a carnivore diet or a keto diet to do that, and you accomplish that goal, then the next underlying, problem in your life or your health is going to show itself. And you're going to say, oh, maybe I need to adjust a little bit here to now accomplish what your next goal is. So the idea that, again, whatever it was that you accomplished, your skin's better or you've lost weight or your gut's better, whatever that is, that approach, fantastic. But just remember, it's okay to shift. In fact, you should shift because the other part of it doesn't seem that important when whatever you're dealing with at this moment is like over, taking over your entire life. But when you've taken that monkey off of your back, there's going to be something else that's going to need some sort of, and that's not a failure. That's actually an accomplishment. I used to think, okay, I did this, and I did this for 2 years, and I was feeling better. And then all of a sudden I have that other thing that popped up that was there. I just was living, I was in such poor health that I just didn't even realize it. And at first I'd feel like a failure, like, oh my gosh, I didn't have it 100% right. Well, actually, I think I did have it 100% right for that moment in my life. And then when I needed to shift, I shifted and accomplished whatever that next goal is. So please don't, I see this a lot in the vegan world. People, a vegan diet, and look, I know there's this animosity between carnivores and vegans and meat eaters and I know this. Again, I think that's hyped up a little more than it should be as well, because I truly believe that for most of the people that are eating ancestrally, eating a carnivore, the reasons that they're making those decisions, the reasons are exactly the same reason that somebody's deciding to go vegan. They're trying to improve their health. They care about the planet. They care about all of these things. So I think we have more in common than we don't. But again, it becomes a lifestyle and all consuming, because food is about everything that we are and everything that we do is embraced and enculturated into our food. Once we've taken a step, now I'm a carnivore, it's hard to then shift. Or now I'm a vegan, it's hard to take a step out of that. But that's exactly what we should do.
Yeah, that's very well said. You see that, right? Once people become, carnivore or vegan, now they go to all the vegan restaurants, they're in the vegan community, and it's become so ingrained in them that, and like you said, they might start a vegan diet, go from eating fast food every day to eat a vegan diet and say, I feel great on a vegan diet. This is amazing, right? Then 6 months later, if they have some other issue, because now they're deprived of B vitamins and protein and everything else that we talk about in the nutrient-dense meat, then it's like, oh, okay, well, like, how do I get out of this now? I'm so intertwined with this community and this everything. And then I've been posting on Facebook, every day for the last year about how I'm a vegan. So I can't change now. So yeah, it's very important to be open-minded, to be able to not be afraid to change when you need to. So yeah, really, really love what you said there, and really love what you've been saying this whole entire episode. So yeah, Dr. Schindler, please let people know, where can they find you, follow you, learn more. You mentioned some cooking classes. Maybe you do some retreats or cooking classes that people could join, but please mention it all.
Absolutely. So a couple things. Like I said earlier, we love in person. We love the connection. I mean, we're all about connection. We have 2 entities here in Chestertown, Maryland, which is very close. We're about a little over an hour from Philadelphia, a little over an hour from Washington, D.C., and just a few hours from New York City. So we're not that hard to get to. One is our restaurant, the Modern Stone Age Kitchen, and the other is the Modern Stone Age Food Lab, where all of our research, all of our teaching, all of our outreach is funneled through the nonprofit, through the Food Lab, and then the restaurant is the Modern Stone Age Kitchen. So you can come here and take a class. You can come here and eat. I know we talked about some crazy foods today. We talked about blood. We talked about insects. We talked about eating clay and that sort of thing. I will tell you, we do have a couple of crazy things here, but the majority of our food would be very familiar to you. Our goal is to take familiar food and make it as nourishing as it can possibly be, and we make everything entirely from scratch. There's no 2 ingredients put together outside of our walls, so we can control that entire process and make sure it's as safe, nutrient dense, and bioavailable as it can possibly be. And I hope we did our job well and made it delicious. You can find us online. You can come and take a class here. We also have a bed and breakfast right next door, so you can come and stay, and you can eat with us and take a class, whatever you like. We're trying to make this a destination so people can just come and connect and embrace and learn and be fully nourished. Online, you can find us at modernstoneage.com, and we're literally in the midst of rebranding, and we have one consolidated website, modernstoneage.com. And you can find everything out there about our food and our classes. And I know this is a little bit far for some people to come, so we do offer all sorts of online classes as well. So some are pre-recorded and some are live. And we have a couple other opportunities if anybody's interested in the kind of connection that we do. We run at least one this year, probably going to run 2 really cool immersive trips. So we run a trip to Ireland every summer, and it's a food history, prehistory, incredible experience for a week. And I believe we're going to run one to Kenya in December. And in that, you will have the opportunity to drink blooded milk.
Nice. Amazing. And the book, Eat Like a Human, any social media handles that people can follow, anything like that?
Absolutely. So the book's Eat Like a Human, you can get it in bookstores and online, but if you get it from us, I'm very happy to sign it. Or if you get it somewhere else, you can visit us. I'm very happy to sign it as well. And then we have social media handles. There's 2 ones to follow. So anything that has to do with the kind of stuff that I was talking about today, you can follow me at Dr. Bill Schindler. So at Dr. Bill Schindler. And then the restaurant and the other entities that we have here, you can follow at Modern Stone Age Kitchen.
Amazing. Dr. Schindler, this was a really great episode, and I hope we can do it again sometime. Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, can you please leave us a rating or review and subscribe? I've realized that while we have actually increased our downloads a lot, we're actually getting a lot of downloads, which I'm really happy about. We actually have very few ratings. And I realized that I've never asked people really to rate much. So I'm asking you now if you could please rate and review and subscribe. And if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to anyone that you think will get value out of this. Also, if you haven't checked out our line of products at buypeakperformance.com, you get 20% off your first order. That's www.buypeakperformance.com. We have some incredible products, including our organic high-altitude coffee. If you don't know this, coffee is one of the most heavily sprayed with pesticides out of any crop. So it's really important that you drink organic coffee. We've gone above and beyond to source what we believe is the highest quality and healthiest organic coffee in the world. We're also famous for our organic green superfood powder. You can get 20% off of that as well at buypeakperformance.com. We also have an organic vegan and paleo plant protein. See, most of the vegan proteins out there are using brown rice protein, which is really not a good source of protein, and it's also a grain. And if you're paleo, you know that grains tend to cause inflammation in some cases for some people. And so we wanted to make one that was paleo friendly and vegan and organic. We made an amazing amino acid profile, so it's really one of the best plant proteins for muscle building. So you can check out Peak Performance Organic Plant Protein. You can find that on our website. Of course, all our products are on Amazon as well. So thanks again. And again, please, if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to someone who you feel can get value out of it. And please leave us a rating, review, and subscribe. Thank you.